Alright everyone, welcome to the Week 3 Tonto's Demise video recap. Another great week in the books. Let's see. We went into this week with four teams that were 0-2, and all four of them were able to pull out a victory this week. We had two of the 2-0 teams going against each other, so obviously only one of you could get a win, leaving us with one team, the team at the top, with a 0 in their record. Quite unusual for this time of year to only have one team with a 0, and that would be the 3-0 FC Bohoric, who rightfully has changed his name, at least temporarily, I guess, in memory of one Rob Baronis, who wrapped his car around a tree or a telephone pole or something like that. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But, like I believe Justin said, it was his very first kicker, so it was a rightful and quality tribute, I guess, let's say, to Mr. Baronis. We'll see him on the other side. Anyway, let's get right down to it. First, we had the defending champ, the Rook, going up against the Huber Slayers. The Rook, who was in 12th place, going against the Huber Slayers, who were coming into this week as the first place team. And the Rook takes this one down, 137.6 to 130.8. Now, unfortunately for the Rook, even in victory, he still does not move up from the 12th spot. You're still in the basement. And if it did not get worse than that, you lost Danny Woodhead. Looks like he's out for the year now. And you traded away Eddie Lacy already. This was already discussed in the podcast. I don't need to get into it in much more detail, but you got Steven Jackson, who did manage to fall into the end zone this week and get you a touchdown. Although you did add Andre Johnson, which is a guy that you leaned on very much last year. I can't remember for sure if did you have Steven Jackson as well? But he's one of those guys. No, that's right, because you kept Dwayne Bowe and Jamal Charles last year. So, like I said, with Andre Johnson, he's a guy that you leaned on last year. I don't know if you're holding on to past glory or what you expect to get from him with his tumultuous at best quarterback situation. But he got you 6 points, which was actually a lot better than Eddie Lacy ended up doing for Brian. So, at least for this week, that's a win. One funny thing to mention too, I think, let's see, the Rook, I think I mentioned this before. It's funny to me, it's funny to everybody else, it's probably not funny to you. Your first 4 picks of the draft were, let's see, Eddie Lacy, Doug Martin, Ray Rice, and Reggie Bush. And then later on, the other 2 running backs that you chose. So you came out of the draft with 6. The other 2 were Danny Woodhead and Robert Turbin. And let's see, Eddie Lacy, traded him away. Doug Martin, he's on your bench because he's hurt and he's awful. Reggie Bush, you're not flexing him and pretty much eliminating most of his value. Ray Rice, obviously not in the league anymore. Perhaps he'll come back at some point. Danny Woodhead, now done for the year. And Turbin, who is now a Springfield Isotope. Thank you for that. You switched them up, obviously, with Steven Jackson, and you've got Matt Asiata now, who seems to be quite the slow runner, but is a good pass catcher. So that's where most of his value has been, at least so far. And so it's kind of a toss-up each week. Who are you going to use? Are you going to stick with Asiata in your flex spot, or are you going to go with Reggie Bush, put him back there? Looks like Adrian Peterson might not be back for the rest of the year, so that's not good. Well, it's not good for Josh, but that could be good for you. I just find it quite interesting that all 6 of the running backs that you drafted, you're really not getting. You've gotten pretty much nothing from any of them, which further, I guess you could say, further supports my opinion that whoever you start in the running back spots doesn't really matter too much, but that's just my theory. I would advise all of you to go against it. As for the Huber Slayers, just a quiet game up and down his roster. Really not too much you can do when that happens. You plugged in Darren Sproles this week, who you missed his giant game last week. As someone who chose to roll with Sproul last year, all year long, a word of advice, you either have to just leave him in your flex spot and just play him every week, or just use him as a bye week plug-in, because he's going to have those big weeks every now and then. It's certainly not going to be every week. I see he got you 6 points this week. So you never know when those big weeks are going to be. You can't predict that. You either just got to plug him in and leave him there, or just use him whenever you really need him for a bye week. Other than that, I mean, you don't really need Sproles anyway, in my opinion. You got a couple other guys, especially Le'Veon Bell. I mean, Steelers look like they're throwing passes to him any chance they get. But anyway, I mean, lineup is good, just a quiet week, and not much you can do about it. Early in the season, so not too much to be worried about. Anyway, enough about this one. Let's move on. Oh, who should we talk about next? Let's go to the matchup of the week. The aforementioned 2 undefeated teams going against each other. One was New Gods Mad Titans. Other one was FC Bohoric. And FC pulls this one out 180.2 to 159.3. And despite 70 points just from Andrew Luck, which certainly had to make Justin quite nervous, although this one started out definitely on the other track. Thursday night game, obviously Matt Ryan and Julio Jones were going up against Harry Douglas and Bobby Rainey. And Bobby Rainey, with 41 rushing yards in garbage time, managed to bring his point total out from the negatives to a whopping 0.1. So he got you 1 yard. A quality effort from Bobby Rainey. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones combined for 87 points, which Andrew Luck got 70. He almost was able to match that just by himself. Unfortunately for FC, both Ryan and Julio were no longer in the game by the fourth quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter, because it was 56-0, something like that. But other than that, it was a fairly quiet week from Reggie Wayne, Jordy Nelson, Chris Johnson, Cordarrelle Patterson. The Buffalo defense didn't do too good for you. I think this is we're starting another streak here of FC having defenses that cannot win or get him. They're always losing him 3 points. He's never getting those +3. But the other bright spot would definitely have to be Marshawn Lynch. Somehow slid all the way down to the second round for FC in the draft this year. 2 touchdowns, 88 yards. I think he's been probably one of the most solid, if not the most solid running back in the entire league so far this year. Other than that, New Gods met Titans, not too much. Another quiet game from Demaryius Thomas. A couple touchdowns from Gio Bernard, but not much in rushing. Quiet game from Forte, Zach Ertz, quiet game. Your Philadelphia defense gave up a ton of yards and a ton of points. So those couple of big performances. Let's see. Especially, like I said, Marshawn Lynch and Julio Jones. When you get 40 points from a wide receiver, that's tough to match. So really, looks like FC got about 61 points from his wide receivers compared to, let's see, about 28 from New Gods wide receivers. So when you get behind by that much, the rest of your players really need to outperform their projections and carry the load for you. But that isn't always going to happen. Unfortunately, Matt Forte did not have a better game, which I was kind of surprised that they didn't throw the ball to him too much, or at least get a touchdown or two out of him. But wasn't happening this week. So FC takes this one, and he moves up to the top of the standings at 3-0. And FC, or New Gods Mad Titans, slips down to 2-1, and I believe he, let's see, third place, not too bad. Next, we had a quite interesting matchup that came down to the very end once again on Monday night. We had my team, the Springfield Isotopes, up against Nick Foley and Dynamite, and the Springfield Isotopes get their first win of the season, 185.7 to 184.95. So a 0.75 point difference here, less than one, all the way down. Came all the way down to the end. Alshon Jeffrey needed 19.5 points to get Jim a win. Unfortunately, he was only able to come up with 18.5, making me sweat out every last minute of the Bears and Jets game. But thankfully for me, I was able to squeak this one out. Probably the worst part of this one was watching Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, who we'll get to later, struggle their way through their 1 o'clock game on Sunday. Packers-Lions, you would not think that would be a low-scoring game. Packers came out and only scored 7 points. Stafford had a couple of turnovers. I don't think he had any touchdowns. Only got me 27 points. Meanwhile, since the Steelers were on Sunday night, the Redskins-Eagles game was on TV here, and I had the pleasure of watching that and watching Kirk Cousins throw the ball all over the field, all over the Eagles, racking up 60-some points, I believe. Yeah, with his long touchdown, it would have been 68 points. So I could have gotten an extra 40 points tacked on to my score if I had used Kirk Cousins, but again, I did not think that the Lions-Packers game would be such a low-scoring one. And meanwhile, going against Nick Foles in that game, he put up 60 points for Nick Foley and Garcon, 31 points from him. Let's see. Not to mention 176 yards and a touchdown from Rashad Jennings. And decent games, but not great from Graham and Gronk. And so going into the Sunday night game, the Steelers and the Carolina Panthers, it was not looking not looking too good for me. The margin was quite a bit, uh, even though New England's defense actually did pretty well for me. I had Antonio Brown and the often ridiculed LeGarrette Blount in my lineup, and as most of you probably know, Antonio, 2 touchdowns, 10 catches, and good old LeGarrette Blount came in and just trucked people over, especially on his touchdown run. I don't know if you saw the Carolina Panther guy come up and said, well, here comes LeGarrette Blount. I'm going to tackle him before he gets in the end zone, and Blount just ran him right over. He also had a 50-yard run. He crossed I think his last carry went for about 15 yards, breaking the 100-point plateau, getting me a +3 bonus while he tried to jump over the defender. Fortunately, he didn't quite kick the guy in the face, but it wasn't a successful jump either. But it was definitely entertaining. But unfortunately for Nick Foley and Dynamite, like I said already, lots of good scores up and down his lineup. Unfortunately, it ended up not being quite enough from Alshon Jeffrey. You only got 1 point from your kicker, and also the Denver D. Unfortunately, they gave up a touchdown on that first play or first drive in overtime instead of giving up a field goal, and the touchdown gave them 6 points, which bumped them up to 26, which meant you went from getting 3 points for points given up to 0, and you lost the game. And so that was at least a 6-point swing there. And when the final score is less than 1 point, pretty much any single thing that could have gone the other way would have changed the outcome. But even if I had lost this match and been 0-3, it would have I'd be upset, but I would have gotten over it pretty quickly because I don't like being involved in them, but I enjoy these matchups that go down to the wire and are really, really close. Unfortunately, they don't happen too often. Although I do have to say, all 3 weeks this year so far, the closest point total matchup, for some reason, I have been involved in all 3 of them. First week when I lost by 6. Last week I think I lost by 14. And now this week I won by less than 1. So the smallest margins in each matchup have been my team, unfortunately. But like I said, I don't mind because it makes everything a little bit more interesting. And the Isotopes move up to 1 and 2, all the way up to 6th place, because we got a whole slew of 1 and 2 teams now. And even in his loss, Nick Foley and Dynamite only down to 7th place, who, by the way, even tougher on Nick Foley, and he would have beaten every other team he could have possibly played this week, except for my team. But that's just the way it goes sometimes. Alright, who do we have next? We had Huber on Huber action with the Huber's homeboys taking on a Huber brother who is McCoy's homeboys. And even though he has changed his name to Huber's homeboys, he's still the Twerkin' Bowl Cuts as far as I'm concerned. And the Twerkin' Bowl Cuts were able to take this one down by a score of 144 to 138.75. Now this one was not looking good for Twerkin, as his team was done after Sunday night, going into Monday. Not much from, let's see, not much from Golden Tate, not much from Stewart, Spiller, Julius Thomas, Monty Ball. Very little from any of those guys. Macklin, a big game, fortunately for you. Cam Newton, pretty good score, and Seattle defense did well enough to get you up there to 144. Unfortunately, for you going into Monday night, your margin of, let's see, you were ahead. Let me check my paper here. Okay, you were leading by about 12 or 13 points, and Jay had Brandon Marshall and Chris Ivory left to go. Between the two of those guys, all he needed was about 13 or 14 points. Brandon Marshall can easily do that all by himself. Chris Ivory, if he had gotten a touchdown, would have definitely made this one go the other way. But somehow Twerkin Bowl Cuts manages to avoid disaster, and Jay only gets, let's see, 1.6 from Brandon Marshall and 5.2 from Chris Ivory. So 6.8. You only got about half the points that you needed to pull out a victory here. A 5.5 point margin, pretty small. I'm sure that Twerkin Bowl Cuts was sweating this one out if he was watching the Sunday night game. Meanwhile, McCoy's homeboys was busy pulling out the rest of his hair, watching that one and wondering why Brandon Marshall can't catch a pass, just or at least a touchdown, something, anything to cover that 12-point margin. But it was not meant to be, and Twerkin Bowl Cuts gets his second victory, moves him up to 4th place, and meanwhile, McCoy's homeboys falls all the way down to 10th. Who's next? We have the Dub C Hooligans, who were up against the winless Possum Magic. And like I said, all of the winless teams turned around this week and came out on top. This one was Possum Magic, 162.45 to 139.8. Like I said before, about Aaron Rodgers, very quiet game. Under 200 yards passing, only one touchdown from him. His score was doubled up by Peyton Manning, 28 to 56. Although on the plus side for Dub C, he had Peyton Manning throwing to Emmanuel Sanders. Unfortunately, he didn't get any touchdowns, but he had almost 150 yards receiving on 11 catches. DeMarco Murray, another good game, 100 yards and a touchdown from him. Somehow you got 20 points from Lamar Miller, but unfortunately, that is pretty much it. The Houston defense, which I believe you talked up a big game about them, they managed to go out and get you 1 point. 1 single point from the Houston Texans defense. Definitely an influencing factor on this outcome, as the Kansas City defense didn't do great, had a couple sacks, but definitely a lot better than 1 point. Kelvin Benjamin, probably his performance is definitely what put this one over the top for Possum Magic. Not great scores up and down his lineup, but quite disappointing so far. I think Keenan Allen has done hardly anything. I believe he was your 2nd round draft pick. Not getting much value out of him so far this year. Larry Fitzgerald, same story. Just I don't know how much he's being affected by Carson Palmer being out, Doesn't seem to be affecting Michael Floyd too much, but 4 points from Larry Fitzgerald just isn't going to cut it. You got 8 from is his name Larry Donnell? I don't even know what his first name is. James Jones got you a couple of points, a whole bunch of points from your kicker, and like I said, between Peyton Manning and Kelvin Benjamin, those two guys did pretty good. Definitely enough to pull this one out and get Possum Magic a 22-point win and his first win of the season. Despite victory, Possum Magic, he is stuck in 11th place, while Dub C drops down to 9th. And let's see, we have one more matchup, I believe, which was the Detonators going up against the winless You My Puddin', winless no more, by a final score of 162.75 to 117.95. And yes, I said 117.95. I believe that is the lowest score that anyone has had so far this year. And if you didn't already guess, that means Detonators, we say goodbye to you in the knockout pool. Better luck next year. As for You My Puddin', I believe he dropped somebody and picked up the Indianapolis defense, and they pretty much just crushed Jacksonville Jaguars. You got a couple picks and a touchdown from them. 40 points from Cutler, 16 from Floyd, 24 from Crabtree. He had 10 catches, pretty good. AJ Green, who was an injury scare last week, came back and got you another 100 yards on 6 catches. Unfortunately for you, Dennis Pitta went down with injury after getting you about 4 points, and looks like he's done for the year. Same injury he suffered last year, so who knows, his career might be in jeopardy, but he's definitely done for the season. As for the Detonators, solid 50 points from Drew Brees. Let's see, miserable, pretty much nothing from Eric Decker, who was a risky play to begin with on his hamstring injury. I believe he ended up tweaking that and going out pretty early on in that game on Monday night. So he didn't really get you much of anything. Mike Evans, 9 points. Donald Brown, 6 points. Joik Bell, 3 points. Eddie Lacy, the man you traded for, a whopping 3.5. Just a miserable performance all around from him and the Packers. I think he got tackled in the end zone for a safety. It was that bad. And your Carolina defense, unfortunately for you, but nice for the rest of us, they were pretty much ran into the ground by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Martellus Bennett, though, solid game for you on Monday night. 2 touchdowns on 5 catches, 50 yards. Unfortunately, You My Puddin' had Jay Cutler throwing to him, so those points were pretty much canceling each other out. And so that was pretty much the story of this one. Like I said, Carolina defense only got you 1 point, maybe 4. I can't remember for sure. But all those low scores up and down your roster. Only 117, lowest score of the year so far. But at least it's probably not going to be the lowest of the whole season for anybody. But we'll see. 3 weeks in, 117, not too good. And I know, Brian, you're probably really excited, thinking, "Oh, you're gonna be 3-0, and the Isotopes would be 0-3, and curse would be lifted. All would be right with the world." And unfortunately, none of those things took place. You're now 2-1, but you're still in 5th place. It's early, but at least you should be excited that you've got 2 wins after 3 weeks. It usually takes you about 6 or 7 weeks to get 2 wins. So the season has been a success so far. But we don't want to get too excited. Like I said, the Detonators are eliminated from the knockout pool this week, and I believe that is every matchup. So we got some good ones coming up here next week in week 4. Every matchup is going to be important. Like I said, we only have one team that's 3-0, one undefeated. Nobody is winless. Everybody's got at least one, and so it's really said only 3 weeks in. We got 10 to go. It's really a toss-up. Some of the teams that didn't look too strong a week or two ago are primed to make a run, try to push their way up the standings, which means the ones who are at the top right now are going to have to defend their territory. And as happens every year, you just never know what's going to happen. The competition is pretty much always tight, and it's going to come down probably to the last week or two of the season until all the playoff spots and everything shakes itself out. But yeah, as always, it's fun to watch every Sunday. Love the games that come down to the Monday nights as much as I wish it would not seem to happen every week, but at least for me, it's much more enjoyable when it does come down and you guys sweat it out, win or lose. Even if I lose, it's fun. It makes it more interesting to have those matches that come down to the wire on Monday night. But week 4 coming up already. I think week 4, is it week 4 or week 5? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to check, but I don't know if everyone paid their league dues, but if they didn't, I believe is week 5 the deadline. I don't know if everybody has paid or not. You'd have to check with Jimmy, but just a reminder to anyone in case you have not paid your league dues, please do so in the next week or two. I guess we could just say, by the end of September. If you haven't done that, make sure to do it, because if you do not, by the deadline, you will be docked your quarterback points each week that you haven't paid your dues. So I believe last year at the draft, everybody paid. I wasn't paying enough attention this year, but just a reminder to anyone who hasn't paid yet. Please do that, and do it very soon. All right, that's about it. Good luck to everyone here coming up in week 4, but especially good luck to me, the Springfield Isotopes.